Imagine this. The Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, has just passed away. In that immense void, the young Muslim community is facing its single greatest test. We're talking about the very foundations of the state beginning to crumble. This is the story of how it was all saved.
And look, this wasn't just some political squabble. No, this was a full-blown crisis of faith. All across the Arabian Peninsula, you had tribes starting to break away. They were refusing to pay the zakat, that's the religious tax, and some were even starting to follow false prophets. This period became known as the Ridda Wars, or the Wars of Apostasy, and honestly, they threatened to snuff out the light of Islam before it even had a chance to really shine.
So right in the middle of this absolute storm, you have one man, Abu Bakr, the first Caliph. He was one of the Prophet's closest companions, but he didn't inherit some peaceful, stable community. Not at all. What he got was a community teetering on the very brink of collapse. And his job? It was absolutely monumental. Pull everyone back together and save that final divine message. So the big question is, how did he pull it off? Well, he went back to a core leadership principle that the Prophet himself had taught, a principle that's right there in the Quran. It talks about the companions having these two qualities that seem like total opposites, being incredibly tough against their opponents, but at the same time being compassionate and gentle with each other. It turns out that delicate balance was the absolute key to everything.
And here's the thing. It wasn't about picking one or the other, being the tough guy or the gentle leader. It was about mastering both. If you leaned too far in either direction, you were just asking for trouble. Think about it. You needed the sword, that toughness, to crush the rebellion and restore order. But you also needed the scale, that sense of gentleness and wisdom, to heal the wounds and actually unite the community again.
Okay, so to actually put this whole philosophy into practice, Abu Bakr does something brilliant. He sets up this perfectly balanced command structure. This was no one-man show, not by a long shot. It was all about putting the exact right people in the exact right places, with each of them representing one side of that critical leadership coin.
And for the role of the sword, there was really only one choice: Khalid ibn al-Walid. This man was a straight-up military genius, famous for his toughness and his skill on the battlefield. In fact, the Prophet himself had given him the nickname one of the swords of Allah. Abu Bakr knew, without a doubt, that Khalid's raw, decisive force was exactly what they needed to tackle these rebellions head-on.
Then, for the role of the scale, you had the Caliph, Abu Bakr himself. While Khalid was out there on the front lines, Abu Bakr stayed in the capital, Medina. He was the calm, gentle, but totally firm anchor for the entire community. And it really shows his perfect wisdom. He deliberately chose the tough-as-nails Khalid to balance his own gentle personality. He was the calm mastermind, orchestrating the whole thing from a distance.
You want a perfect example of this wisdom in action? Get this. At one point, one of the other commanders, a guy named Abu Qatada, actually leaves the battlefield to go complain to the Caliph about Khalid. So what does Abu Bakr do? His response is immediate and incredibly firm. He basically tells the commander off, saying, "Are you kidding me? You don't just abandon your general in the middle of enemy territory? That's how you get everyone defeated." Then he orders him to turn right around and get back to his post. Just like that, he reinforced Khalid's authority and kept the army united and focused.
All right, so let's shift gears and head over to the Eastern Front. This is where we can really see how this combination of strategic wisdom from the top and raw tactical force on the ground actually translated into major victories. We're going to dive into the campaigns in Oman and Bahrain.
So over in Oman, a false prophet named al-Walid was gaining a lot of power. From way back in Medina, Abu Bakr sends out two separate armies. One is led by Hudayfa, the other by Arfajah. And his orders were crystal clear. You're going to march separately, but you will converge at a single point and join forces to crush this rebellion together. It was a brilliant pincer movement, planned and coordinated from hundreds of miles away.
And the result? The strategy was absolutely devastating. At the final, decisive Battle of Daba, those unified Muslim armies completely crushed al-Walid's forces. We're talking 10,000 enemy fighters killed. 10,000! The region was secured, and it was brought right back into the fold. That's what a unified command structure can do.
Okay, now let's jump over to neighboring Bahrain. Here, the rebellion was based on a pretty fundamental misunderstanding. The rebels were arguing that if Muhammad was a real prophet, he wouldn't have died. But then this steadfast Muslim leader, al-Jarood, comes along and just uses simple, powerful logic. He just asks his people, "Hey, were there other prophets before Muhammad?" And they're like, "Yeah, of course." So he asks, "And what happened to them?" And they reply, "Well, they died." His point was so clear, you couldn't argue with it.
All prophets pass away, but God's message is eternal.
So, once he had won back the hearts and minds of many, Abu Bakr sends in another brilliant commander, al-Alla ibn al-Hadrami, to finish the job militarily. And al-Alla pulls off this incredibly daring move, a surprise attack on the rebel camp in the dead of night. The apostate army was caught completely sleeping, literally, and was totally routed. They left behind a huge amount of wealth. The victory was so complete that the few who were left had to scramble onto boats and flee to a nearby island just to escape.
So, when you take a step back and look at all these victories, you realize it's about so much more than just military tactics. What you're really seeing is the direct result of a very specific philosophy of leadership, that perfect, delicate balance between strength and wisdom, between force and mercy, a balance that was nurtured by the Prophet himself.
And that, right there, is the biggest takeaway from all of this. The Ridda Wars were won because you had the calm, strategic, unifying wisdom of Abu Bakr working in perfect harmony with the decisive, hard-hitting, forceful action of Khalid ibn al-Walid, the scale and the sword. It's so clear that one couldn't have succeeded without the other. It was this divinely inspired partnership that literally saved a community from falling apart.
And it really leaves us with a question that's just as relevant today as it was back then, doesn't it? In any organization, any country, heck, even in our own lives, finding that perfect balance between strength and wisdom, between being firm when you need to be and being compassionate when it counts, that's still the ultimate challenge of leadership, isn't it?